How many times have you heard experiences from individuals and families who are struggling with the challenges of aging, caregiving, the unknowns of health, loneliness, financial worry, and just general overwhelm? I spent 10 years working in the aging sector, hearing these same stories of struggle over and over again. And at the root of it all, no one is teaching us how to plan for aging from a holistic perspective. So welcome to the Ageucation Podcast. This is where you will get the aging education you didn't know you needed. My name is Jess Davis. If you are in your 60s or 70s, or you have parents in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, you are in the right place, my friend. We are all aging. We all want to maintain our autonomy and independence as we age. So let's intentionally prepare our families for the needs of our eldest years. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ageucation Podcast. Today's story is one that I have heard multiple times from multiple different families, and it comes down to someone's perception of what I'll call an imbalance in care responsibility among family members for an older adult. So, although there are many variations that I'll touch on in a minute, the general situation is that within a family, care is needed for an aging parent or sometimes for both parents. And many times, not always, but many times there will be one adult child, if there are multiple siblings, one adult child will take the lead on partnering with the aging parent to navigate their care needs. But sometimes the perception can arise among siblings or their parents of this imbalance in sharing responsibilities to care for the aging parents. So I'll give you a few different examples of this situation that I've seen before. Example A, two sisters both live in the same town as their aging parents, but one sister is providing the majority of the care to their parents, and this sister is providing care continuously. She is continuously annoyed by the lack of help that the other sister is giving, and it creates this really sticky tension between the two of them and within the whole family, because the sisters obviously have differing perspectives of how responsibilities should be shared for the parents. So that's one form of this story that I've come across. Example B, between aging parents, the mother was needing family care and her husband was coordinating care for her. But he was very stuck on the fact that their son and their daughter-in-law were providing 80% of the help and care to the mother, while their daughter and their other son were providing very little care. He was telling me all the ways he was trying to get the two children to be more helpful and be a part of things, but to no avail. So that's the second example. Now here is the third. Example C, an older adult man lived on his own and his children didn't live in the same city as him. He actually didn't have strong relationships with his children, and it was his neighbor who had essentially become his care partner and was providing informal care and helping him around his home. And the person describing this situation to me was another neighbor that lived on their street. And she was so outraged at the fact that this man's own children weren't caring for him and that it was the neighbor who had stepped in to support him. But with all of these different situations, the root of the story is the same. Someone is believing that there is an imbalance in care responsibilities among the older adult circle. And that person believing that tends to feel the situation is unfair and inexcusable. And I find when I ask a few questions and dig into their perspective on it a little bit more, they actually believe that the other people in the situation have this specific level of responsibility or requirement to provide care to the older adult, and they're not meeting that requirement. It actually creates a lot of anger because they're just continuously watching this other person fall short of what they believe is morally right or just. So this results in a few things. Number one, they are creating this story in their head about why these other people or this other person isn't pulling their weight or managing their share of responsibilities. So they create assumptions and accusations against another person, and then they just sit and stew on it in their own head. Number two, they have therefore created an expectation in their head that they believe the other person should be meeting. And a lot of times they've never actually explained to the other person what the expectation is and why they believe that this expectation should be laid out. And then number three, those unmet expectations create resentment. Every time the expectation isn't met, it builds and builds and creates this list of ongoing wrongdoings that result in anger and disappointment. But when you break it down, like I've just explained, and think about this, there is a story that you've created in your head. There is an expectation that you've never explained, and there is resentment. The anger and disappointment that results is actually being created and perpetuated by you, by the stories in your head, the unmet expectations and the resentment. You are creating all that anger and resentment yourself because you don't know why that other person is providing the level of care responsibility that you think they should. It's not your job to convince someone that they have a certain level of responsibility to care for their parent. One of the biggest things we have to understand is that everyone has a different capacity to care for someone. You and your sister do not have the same capacity of care to give to your parents. Your adult children do not have equal capacities to care for you as their aging parent. And it is wasted energy to stew on the fact that one person is providing more care than another within a family. You do not control another person's ability or capacity for these things. Why create your own cycle of unmet expectations, resentment, and anger? You are causing that anger and disappointment for yourself. And I will pause here to say that I'm not advocating for all of the care responsibility to be on a single person or on a few people. Like, burnout in caregiving is a real thing, and everyone needs help and support and encouragement. But what I'm trying to say is we cannot create expectations of other people to provide care that they cannot meet those expectations. If the need is there, that help is needed, support is needed, then you have to look to other avenues, because some people cannot meet the expectations that family members put on them. I've seen it so many times. You have to lower your expectations to manage your future emotions, reactions, and results, because your anger and disappointment is the result of your own unmet expectation. If you lower your expectations, it will reduce your resulting level of anger. Because what happens is people become chronically disappointed in someone else's behavior. And it's not their behavior causing your disappointment. It's the unmet expectation you've created in your head. And that makes the relationship and the situation worse. So by lowering your expectation, it will reduce your resulting level of disappointment. Are you listening to this podcast and feeling like you want more? Like you want to take the next step in learning about age planning and how that could benefit your family? Well, I have the perfect little introduction into my 3 main frameworks that I use to coach families through being proactive and intentional about their aging journey. So come check them out. The Ageucation Mini-Course. The course is made up of 6 videos that are packed with valuable information and framework explanations to give you a strong visual and create a foundation for understanding how to start being proactive and intentional about planning for aging in your family. Visit my website, nestage.ca/mini-course to learn more and dive in. That's nestage.ca/mini-course. You can find the link in the show notes. So again, if history says they are going to do it again, how do you want to feel and react when it happens again? When they don't raise their hand to take dad to a doctor's appointment, when they don't ask how they can help this week, when they don't call to check in or they don't make a meal, you cannot control their actions. So, do you want to spin out and feel angry and disappointed and annoyed? No one wants to feel that way. It's a terrible headspace to live in. So I would urge you to ask yourself, what purpose does my anger serve? If it throws off your whole day and your whole body, your emotional state, etc., it's not serving you. So how can you manage your expectations when this does happen again? And maybe this question is even, what are the expectations you have for yourself when this does happen again? Because maybe an expectation can't even be put on the other person because they repeatedly don't meet expectations. You have to come to accept that you cannot change the actions of another person. You can change how you expect someone to act and how you expect to react to them. I'm going to say that again. You can change how you expect someone to act. If they have repetitive behaviors of not taking responsibility for things, then you can anticipate that. And then in turn, you can control how you're going to react to that. And if you can become self-aware and cognizant of these things, you will feel so much lighter. Because when you stop letting other people's behavior control your emotions, you regain control of your emotions. When you choose to think differently about any given situation, you will feel differently and you will react differently. It's like, what's that quote? If you want a different result, you have to try something different. I think we often use that quote with things that are a lot more tangible, but it applies just the same to our mindset and our emotions. If you want to think in a more positive light and feel better about things and enjoy things, you have to change your perspective. You have to change your mindset on things. And in episode 5, I think it was, I gave a statement as a tool to create calm and clear conversations, which I'm going to repeat here because I think it can really apply well to this situation as well. Because again, what we really need to bring into the light of these situations is having everyone understand what the ultimate goal of care is and whether the actions and intentions are lining up with that goal. If you remember, the statement is, help me understand. Help me understand why you aren't volunteering to help Dad with XYZ. Help me understand why you don't call to check in. Help me understand why you aren't making a meal. And I want to note that it's often not a matter of physical capacity or calendar capacity when someone doesn't step up. Sometimes it's a mental or emotional capacity that just isn't there. And we go through seasons of different mental and emotional capacity or availability that we are able to pour out and give to other people. And we have to give grace and compassion around that. Experiences and realities affect everyone in different ways. But if asked correctly, this statement, help me understand, can really create calm conversation for clear communication. So watch the stories you are telling yourself about other people's thoughts, intentions, and actions. You do not have control over other people. You do have control over your expectations and your resulting emotions. So simmer on that this week, and I will see you back here again next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ageucation Podcast. I have 3 reminders before you go. Number 1, go check out the show notes for any resources or links that I mentioned in this episode that may have piqued your interest. Number 2, please share this episode with a friend whom you think it would bless, because in order for more families to benefit from my age planning resources, I need listeners like you to spread the word. And number 3, I would love to hear from you. Email me with your thoughts on this episode or suggest a topic you'd like to hear on a future episode. Find my email in the show notes. And remember, we're all aging. Aging is the same as living, and it is a privilege to live and to age.